Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to our work session meeting for October 15th, 2020. Ms. Boynton, could you please read for us, please?
Visitors are always welcome at our board meetings. So that the meeting may proceed uninterrupted, please silence all electronics.
Thank you. We can please, oh, I'm sorry, Pledge of Allegiance. I'm sorry, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for one nation. I believe I went out of order, and I sorry about that, but Mr. Parkinson, could you please call the roll?
Mrs. Boynton,
Here.
Mr. Kennedy,
Here.
Mrs. Patterson,
Present.
and Mr. Stevens.
Here. Thank you. We're going to move down to our awards presentations. Oh, I'm sorry, yes. And at this time, I would like to put on record that Mr. Tench is not here on record. So we're going to go down to awards presentations and communication. Dr. Sullivan, you have anything going?
We do. Thank you, Mr. Stevens. We have 3 presentations this evening, and I'm going to do things in a little bit in reverse. I'm going to open with a birthday surprise for Mrs. Boynton. Her birthday was on Monday, so we have a little something special for you.
Oh,
So we
boy.
could all wish her a happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Your little favorite goodies too, like Rob and I end up getting.
Hers is different.
Oh, really? Hers is a little different,
You can open it. Yeah, let's see.
huh? Okay.
She just told me, what'd you just tell me the other day?
I said I have nothing.
Okay.
Anyway, thank you.
All right.
You're welcome.
Listen to that. It takes your birthday in order to get some gear, huh?
I'm glad it hadn't passed.
But see, it shows you I listen, because you did say that in passing at the parade, and I caught that. You're welcome. Happy
Well,
birthday.
happy belated birthday.
Thank you.
Happy belated birthday.
Okay. Okay, Dr. Sullivan.
Okay, now we'll get to business. We have 3 presentations this evening. The first being a presentation by Carol Wood. Mrs. Rakowski and Mr. Gudadari are here today, so they're going to present for you first. So we'll draw our attention there. And you have a PowerPoint, right?
So good evening, Mr. President, Madam Vice President, members of the board, Dr. Selico, Dr. Johnson, and members of the cabinet. I am Mary Catherine Rakowski. I am the principal of Carewood Intermediate, and this is Mr. Dominic Gudadaria. He is Dean of Students at Carewood Intermediate. As you know, we have tackled many hurdles since March 13th. At times, these obstacles have seemed insurmountable, but in true Bedford tradition, we continue to inspire everyone, every day, to achieve excellence. I say this because our mission statement of inspiring everyone, every day, to achieve excellence has taken hold at Carewood. There is a 4th grade male student who emails me every day. He checks on me and tells me how he's going to roar throughout the day. As I reply back to him, I find myself sitting up straighter and I beam. As I reflect on this, I find that I am inspired by this young man. I've only met him through a computer screen. I work hard to keep tackling these hurdles because of his emails. On a side note, he now has his classmates emailing me, and they tell me how they are roaring throughout their day.
This year, we have begun our monthly recognition program. Whether you are a staff member, a teacher, or a student, you must display a characteristic or characteristics of respect, achievement, open-mindedness, or responsibility. to be nominated. All students who receive a positive referral receive a Roar shout out and are officially nominated for Scholar of the Month. For September, Carrollwood's Teacher of the Month was Mrs. Ann Laszlo. Our September Scholars of the Month were Michaela Young, Vea Tucker, and Jason Carmichael. Congratulations to all. Yesterday, we were able to complete a home visit with parent permission, of course, to log on a student who recently enrolled into our district. With pride, we can say that Carrollwood Scholars still remain at 100% logins to Google Classrooms. Between myself, Mrs. Rakowski, Mr. Brinson, and Ms. Ballou, we continually monitor scholar attendance and engagement. As we have made home visits with parent guardian permission, we collaborate to work through a myriad of issues. As we work to increase partnerships with students and families, we continue to see an increase in both attendance and engagement. The most challenging part of virtual learning is the fact that we cannot see our scholars face to face, and we know they need us just as much as we need them.
This is just a quick snapshot of what we teach. In each 90 and 40-minute class, there is so much from whole group to small group to individual learning that goes on. I could spend a whole day on it. However, much of what takes place in that 90-minute English language block and mathematics block, let us start building CCIPs, which I will share, as well as changes that were made as a result of data and achievement. A few things I want to point out before we continue are the student personal learning pathways that will be created in iReady and Map Accelerator, and the fact that we do offer band, choir, and orchestra at the intermediate level. As I stated, we are focused on English, language arts, and mathematics. Our first goal is displayed. We will implement evidence-based instructional strategies that focus on the science of reading to increase the percentage of students who are proficient or higher, or projected to be by 5%. We are focusing on strengthening our Tier 1 structured literacy approach based on the science of reading. By continuing to use decoding strategies and language comprehension strategies in and out of the classroom, scholars will inevitably strengthen their individual reading comprehension skills. Last year, we immersed ourselves in research around the topic of vocabulary, as well as worked with Andrew Pinney regarding disciplinary literacy strategies. The disciplinary literacy strategies can be seen in the science classrooms through the graphic organizers and 3-level response guides the students are engaged in. Beginning second quarter, the 4th grade scholars will begin to take the writing strategies they are learning in the English language arts classroom and apply them to the social studies and science texts. I am currently working with our new curriculum specialist, Dorinda Hall, to put the research of Tier 2 vocabulary words into action.
Our second goal revolves around mathematics. We will implement evidence-based instructional strategies to conceptually develop number sense in students to increase by the percentage of 5% or more of those who are in categories of proficient, advanced, and accelerated. Through our analysis of trend data, we have identified that our scholars have a conceptual gap in mathematics. This foundational understanding must be a major focus in order to move to the procedural components. We are currently implementing evidence-based instructional strategies that focus on mathematical fluency, accuracy, efficiency, and flexibility to develop each scholar's conceptual understanding.
Our building achievement and data firmly gives us evidence to support both the reading and mathematics goal. Going back to last year, we began the year by creating a school-wide testing environment that came from both educator and student input. We tested the whole student body at one time from the hours of 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Although this was not the preferred time for teachers, I wanted to keep student routines as consistent as possible. We continued this course of action for both fall and winter testing. For the first time since I've been at Carrollwood, the winter map data did not decline but maintained steady. As a staff, we began to analyze map data, percentiles, and projected state scores. I consistently asked, what does the data mean? What does the scholar know? What are the scholar's challenges? How does this impact our lesson planning and our lesson delivery? And how does this change the way we assess? This is just an example of how we started to break down our data, color code our data, find the weaknesses and the strengths of our scholars, and how that impacted our lesson planning and delivery as we went through our school day. I could also spend a whole day explaining this, but I think I would bore you guys. This impacted us this upcoming school year as we move through our planning for our master schedule. We implemented an intervention extension time for our English language arts. We have this time twice a week for a total of 60 minutes, 30 minutes on Tuesday and 30 minutes on Thursday. We also have an intervention extension time for mathematics that is built into our math block. It is a time where our students meet in small groups for a total of 30 minutes every single day. We will continue with our whole building testing environment once we return to school for face-to-face learning. And we will continue with implementation of data conversations on a grade level basis, not as a whole group, but grade level this year. And our building goal 3.
Our last building goal is Carrollwood's ability to strengthen and sustain teacher, student, and parent positive relationships and engagement. We again analyzed data, this time focusing on discipline components. We identified needs and changed our arrival and dismissal procedures, as well as how we traveled through the hallways. With the help of Mr. Sam Waters and Ms. Ballou, we implemented restorative meetings with our 5th graders. The Bedford Mentoring Group, or BMG, is another example of collaboration in order to serve and meet the social emotional learning needs of our male scholars. The BMG Parent Guardian informational meeting is actually being held virtually this evening at 6:30 p.m. By the end of the 3rd quarter, our discipline referrals had decreased by 88 from the previous year. During the 3rd quarter, we began using Public School Works. There is a feature in Public School Works that allows staff members to recognize scholar efforts and write positive referrals. At first, the students thought this was a joke. Soon, you could hear them talking to one another about receiving a positive referral from their teachers. Even our hard-to-reach students would smile when they got a positive call home or communication. Soon it became a competition on which grade level received the most in a given week. Mr. Brinson has planned 20-minute morning meetings for our scholars every day to start the day. Feedback from both teachers and scholars has been extremely positive this far regarding those morning meetings. Interestingly enough, in meeting with many of our teachers, their professional goals have now mirrored our building goals. Please be on the lookout for upcoming events.
Our upcoming events mirror our building goals. We have our math shorts, and they will be posted on the website. We will have a Eureka introduction for our families. We will then focus on concepts for each grade level. Teachers will explain our math practice standards, and we will focus on fluency.
Our literacy shorts are going to focus on talking vocabulary, something that we had started last year. And we are continuing to pick up this year with the work that we did with Mr. Andrew Pinney. Also, book chats with the Watchdogs. Our Watchdogs program is a parent involvement program to support students and to get fathers into, or male role models into our building, interacting and volunteering and being a part of the educational process.
I apologize. And then we will culminate with our One School, One Book, and the title this year is The One and Only IBIT. And last but not least, thank you for your time, attention, and support. It's greatly appreciated.
Lord, any questions you may have for?
This is just a personal note. Mrs. Rakowski, how are my girls doing?
They're getting big.
I know they are. I
The
haven't seen
oldest
them
one
in a
is
long
now-
time.
The oldest one is now taller than me, Ms.
Oh my
Patterson.
God.
So 7th grade and 5th grade.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Haven't seen them in a long time.
Thank you for asking.
I do have a question. I have a question. Congratulations, there's great news, everything, especially with the positive relationships that are happening here at work. I have a question though, in regards to the data. You said the map data did not change. The results are from this. What was that time period? Were we talking from fall to winter or winter to spring?
It was fall to winter. We did not decrease. We did not put it out as we call it.
Right.
For map data, we did not test in spring
Right.
because of COVID. And we were really excited to see.
That was really good.
We were waiting. There was something in the air that we were hoping for big things.
Well, you got it. That's great. That's great. And I had another question. Could you tell me a little bit more about the PGIM? Parents Guidance Informational Meeting? What happens during those meetings? I'm just curious.
BMG?
BG.
Yes, the Veteran Mentoring Group is
Yes.
It was started last year. It's in the second year of the pilot program. We have high school mentors that are trained by a mentorship, through a mentorship program. Inspiration for Education, I believe is the actual name. And they go through an 8-hour training period over the summer where they commit themselves to being a mentor, get trained, and then our 2nd through 6th graders right now at Carrollwood and Glendale have an opportunity to be able to get aligned with a mentor so we can continue to enhance that connection from building to building throughout the communities, but then also within the district. So our young scholars can see what they're aspiring to be and do. Our high school scholars have an opportunity to be able to give back and enhance those connections and kind of start to work towards philanthropy work and things of that nature.
Thank you. Thank you.
I do have probably a joint question. One, which is the Student of the Month. Do you have anything in place? Well, here's two of them. Student of the Month and the positive referrals. Now, for the Student of the Month, do you have anything in place, or do you see the same students on a regular basis being recognized in the month? Is there, different students, or if there are those students who are not being recognized on a regular basis? Do you have something that you have in place to somewhat encourage those to do things a little different, to be recognized as Student of the Month? And the positive referral piece, do you have same thing? Is there the same routine of positive reports with the same group, or is it some other ways that we have put in place regarding recognizing those who don't get recognized as much?
So the positive referrals, anybody could be nominated for a positive referral. So once you're nominated for a positive referral, you're nominated to be Student of the Month. So you take the names that are student of the month, all the fourth grade names, and then you give them back to the teachers, and they go through them. And from there, you look to see who's outstanding for the month. So once you become student of the month, you really can't become student of the month again for the year. That's one of the criteria. But you can always, I mean, if you're a student and you, like the student who has emailed me over and over again, he's got a positive referral. And now the students that are emailing me, they can get a positive referral just for being respectful for emailing me, or open-minded because they're emailing me.
So the positive referral runs into the student of the month being the student of the month. You have to be, you know, that's
You
the
have to be
stage,
referred
steps.
through that process. And it could be, Mr. Stevens, it could be hanging back and opening a door for someone, or it could be hanging back and helping clean the cafeteria. Anything that shows respect, responsibility, open-minded, or even. And we really went through that because you do happen to see the same students being referred, but we really want our students to shine.
Sure.
And when they thought the positive referral was a joke at first, now then you started to see everybody starting to outdo each other to get that referral.
Good. Okay, thank you. Anything else? Bill? Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry for the coughing.
Well, wearing these masks on a regular basis can do that to you. Yes, indeed. Okay, well, we have another presentation by our treasurer, Mr. Parkinson. All right.
Is this adjustable? Oh, that's better. All right, thank you, Mr. Stevens, board, Dr. Selico, for your time this evening to go over draft of the 5-year forecast. I've been working on this since almost day one since I started here, and I've shared the document a few times with Dr. Selico's cabinet to go through it and to make sure things look good and things are properly and appropriately accounted for. So tonight, I'm going to go through the revenue estimates and assumptions. I'm going to go through the same thing with expenditures, and then we'll get to where I think the ending cash is going to be for the school district for the next 5 years. Just a quick snapshot of all of the revenues for the school district. Again, the 5-year forecast just relates to the general fund. So this excludes your state grants, federal grants, so on and so forth. So with respect to revenues, the revenue for the school district is going to be relatively flat for the next 5 years. Property taxes are kept flat under the state constitution. State funding is going to be flat. I don't anticipate state funding increasing exponentially anytime soon, although House Bill 305 is currently in the House Finance Committee being discussed. And from what I understand from my Google Meet with the treasurers this morning, the House Speaker is in favor of House Bill 305, so maybe that might change the district's finances. But right now, that's more of a footnote than a number in this document. So more specifically, as we get deep into the revenues, property taxes, I mentioned, are kept flat. So regardless of what happens with your property values, your voted millage is going to keep your property taxes the same. So an example I like to give is Amazon builds their second world headquarters inside Bedford City Schools. What happens to our property tax collections? And the answer is they stay exactly the same with voted millage. Nothing's going to change. The same thing with if Bill Gates decides to build a giant mansion within Bedford City Schools, what's going to happen to our tax collections? They're going to stay perfectly flat. So the green line you see are residential and commercial properties. The red is public utility. The distinction between the two as far as taxes are concerned, public utility, they are taxed on the full voted millage, whereas homeowners and commercial businesses, retail businesses, are taxed on effective mills. So as long as your voted millage doesn't change, then if your public utility properties grow, then you're going to gain that extra money. So for example, in the 5-year forecast, your public utility taxes are estimated to go from about $6.7 million to about $7.5 million. Conversely, your real estate taxes are going to grow by $200,000 or $300,000, and that's because of House Bill 920. So this is basically what's dictating the property taxes within the school district. In the upper right-hand corner, you have your effective millage. In the upper left-hand corner, you have your reappraisal and your updates, which is reflective in the graph. So if you can see the really large spikes, those are your reappraisal years. That's where the county is required by law to visit every parcel of property and assess the value, report that data to the Department of Taxation, and the Department of Taxation tells the county auditor where those numbers need to land. And in between, it's just sales data that the county reports. So you can kind of get a visual of where your values are growing. Real estate and your public utility, about 0.5%. I don't see very much growth in real estate, your commercial base. Your public utility is the value that's going to grow for the school district. But again, what caps you is your voted mill. So you're going to get the growth, but you're not going to get as much as you may expect. Getting a little deeper, we're going to state funding. You could see clearly fiscal 20, fiscal 21, the fiscal year we're in currently, there is a steep drop in the district's state revenue collections. And that's because the governor ordered a $300 million cut to all school districts. Now that was graded depending on where school districts fell on a scale. But Bedford was no different than many school districts where we saw our funding cut. Now for fiscal 22 to 25, the information and feedback I've been getting from fellow treasurers and other people throughout the state is the economics of the state aren't as bad as the state initially forecasted for the pandemic. So the graph on the left-hand side, you'll see a big spike. That's the unemployment rate. And you can kind of see that rate coming back down. So at its peak, Ohio was 15%. We're now about 7-8%. So it's moving in the right direction. Still not in an area where we'd like it to be, but it's at least moving in the right direction. Revenues for the state of Ohio weren't as bad as the state thought. They were only down 4.6% in monies. And based on other actual collections that the state of Ohio has received, this is where I think that the money is going to go back up to at least fiscal 19 levels. So the district's going to see roughly $9+ million per year in state funding, I think, next school year and beyond. And again, it's just based on conversations that myself, my colleagues have had with various representatives from the state of Ohio. The other thing that drives funding is enrollment. So the bottom right-hand graph has the enrollment. So these numbers come directly from the Ohio Department of Education. They're the October enrollment count. It's publicly available. And all I did was pull off the numbers for Bedford for each October in the last 12 years. So the trend is we're losing enrollment. So in the last 12 years, we've lost about 650 students, or about 17% of our student population. Not to say that we wouldn't see increases here and there, but I think the trend line is going to continue in a downward movement. I don't think we're anywhere near what's called a guaranteed district, which means the state of Ohio guarantees this level of funding for Bedford City Schools. I don't think we're there yet, but it's where we're certainly going in that direction. But nothing in this 5-year forecast period is going to indicate that we're going to be down to that level. And then up above in the upper right-hand corner, that graph indicates what every school district in the state of Ohio, Bedford included, is experiencing, in that the state of Ohio is pushing more and more responsibility of school funding to the local property owner. So you can see on the left-hand side of that graph is where we were the last 3 years. The right-hand side of that graph is where we're going to be the next 5 years. And as you can see, the blue line indicates where the local property owner is responsible and their share is growing. Red bar graph represents the state's responsibility, and you can see that is decreasing. And that's a function of the state funding formula. So for the next 5 years, I foresee more of the local property owner here in Bedford City Schools being more responsible for school funding and the state being less responsible in as terms of funding schools. The real hit to revenue for the school district is your TPP reimbursements. So the dark purple line represents actual reimbursements we've received from the state of Ohio. The light purple line represents what we've lost. So at our peak in 2010, this district received $8.5 million in reimbursements from the state of Ohio. By the time we get to the end of this current 5-year forecast, that's down to $1 million. So we have lost millions of dollars in funding from the state of Ohio due to the TPP reductions implemented by Governor Kasich. And just to take a look at those numbers a different way, these represent losses in terms of percentages. So between 2010 and 2025, we would have lost nearly 90% of our funding from this particular reimbursement.
Bill?
Yes,
can you
ma'am.
just for the audience and for maybe the board, explain what TPP stands for and what it,
Oh, I'm
why
sorry.
it's so important to this area particularly, which is our auto mile.
Sure. So TPP is tangible personal property. So way back when, the state of Ohio actually assessed a property tax on furniture, fixtures, and equipment. So imagine if you're Target. You have to pay tax on all your furniture and fixture equipment for all your stores throughout the state of Ohio. So when you filed that tax return, you filed it wherever you were physically located. So your tax return might be a foot thick, to exaggerate. So what the state of Ohio said, and a lot of businesses lobbied to get rid of this tax because that tax is not common amongst the 50 states. So what the state of Ohio did was they implemented a commercial activity tax, and they got rid of the tangible personal property tax. So what the state did is they recognized local governments, to include schools, were going to lose a lot of money if this tax completely disappeared. So the drug deal was, under Governor Taft, was, okay, schools, local governments, we will reimburse you 100% for your loss. And that was the case for many years. Governor Strickland was elected, nothing really changed, and Governor Kasich came in, and he came in when the recession hit. And what he said was, one, I don't like this. I don't like the state reimbursing schools and other local governments. And two, I need to cut the state's cost. So what he began to do is he started to phase out these reimbursements. But initially, it was phased out over 17 years. Kasich gets reelected, he hammers these reimbursements even more so. And not only did the 17 years get compressed, but the amount of loss that local governments, to include schools, lost became greater year over year. Bedford is unique in that we're still receiving reimbursement. Many school districts' reimbursements disappeared years ago. So right now, according to the Ohio Department of Taxation, we're still going to receive this reimbursement in some form through 2028. So 3 years beyond this forecast period. But still, the loss to Bedford City Schools, even though we're still receiving a reimbursement, is significant and is impactful on the district's finances. Any questions on revenues? Anything I can answer?
The reason we're still receiving the TPP?
It's so the way the values have worked out for Bedford schools is that under the calculations that the Department of Taxation has put forth, we're still entitled to those reimbursements. If our reimbursements had initially been low, just for sake of discussion, let's say we received $200,000, we would have been wiped out years ago because the state then put in a floor. Okay, your reimbursements don't reach this level. Okay, forget it. You're done. We're not reimburse you anymore. So we're still fortunate in that we're one of the very few school districts that still receive this. Now, the second half of the forecast, expenses. Salaries, wages, retirement, insurance. So that's line 301 and 302. The major assumption here is 2% for all employee groups this year and next. I know we have negotiations coming up after fiscal 22 for the teachers. We have OPSI negotiations probably coming up fairly soon. Your retirement is 14% paid to STRS, which are your teachers and certified administrators, and SERS, which are custodians and people like me and Jerry. You have Medicare in there, and then obviously your medical plans, your dental plans, your vision plans, your life insurance plans. These are just copies from the actual language, and then some of the assumptions going into the calculations of salaries, wages, retirement, and insurance. All of your other expenditures, you can see there's a slight spike in fiscal 21, again, due to the pandemic. Like many school districts throughout the state, our expenses increased. Yes, we received CARES money. Yes, we received ESSER money, basically money from the federal government to help offset expenses related to the pandemic. But the general fund did also spend money, and there's a slight spike in that as a result. But beyond this fiscal year, I'm going to make the assumption that eventually the pandemic is going to subside and we can return to some level of normalcy. So you'll note that the expenses, I'm not projecting a huge spike in expenses, and I'm also not using the pandemic as part of my baseline because I think that's an anomaly. I don't think that should be included in looking forward because of the anomaly of higher expenses. So the expenses that I'm showing for the school district overall are increasing very slightly from year to year. And I think that matches the historical trend for Bedford. Bedford really doesn't have large spikes in expenses year over year over year. You know, we're somewhere between a little less than 1% and maybe 2%. And that's the same projection I'm making for all the other expenses moving forward. Now, the caveat is we do have aging buildings. Potentially, there may be a bond issue. So I have projected a certain amount of monies toward making the buildings warm, safe, and dry for the students to be able to learn. Now, it's about $900,000 in purchase services and roughly $500,000 in supplies. Of course, you can have a water line break, you can have a major roof leak, you can have some other catastrophic thing happen to a school building, and it's going to require a whole lot of money to get that building back up to being warm, safe, and dry. So absent any major unknown, unforeseen expenses, I'm trying to keep those types of expenses into the buildings flat, knowing that potentially there is a bond issue that may come up. And if that is something that it doesn't happen, then we can reassess the monies that we spend each year to keep the buildings warm, safe, and dry. Debt schedule. So there are 3 pieces of debt. The last debt payment for the energy note was due today. So that's done and over with as of the close of business today. And then we have the remaining piece for the Chanel property, for the school board and the Heskett track. So those pieces are coming out of the general fund and the PI fund. But I wanted you to get an idea of the debt payments. And those go out to 2029, the end of calendar year 2029. So if we take all the revenue and all the expenses and we see where we're at, you can see I've highlighted this fiscal year. And the reason I highlighted this fiscal year in particular is this is the year I think we're going to start deficit spending. So we're projected to deficit spend about $760,000. And so when your flat revenue line is getting crossed by an increasing elevated expenditure line, it's time to take a look at expenses and kind of see where we can do to bring that back in line. So overall, the budget's about $54 million. Revenue is about $54 million. But again, fiscal 21, we're going to start to deficit spend. And you can see in the green bars, our cash balances are going to start to decline as a result. So we're going to go from a $17 million cash carryover this year and go to a deficit of about $2 million by fiscal 25. Again, this is just the graph, just looking at cash. And you can see at the end of the 5-year forecast, a slight deficit. And then lastly, the GFOA, basically an association of accounting geeks. What they say is that as a good standard is 30 days cash on hand at the end of any fiscal year. Bedford is in a very strong position, financial position, in that we well exceed those 30-day threshold as set forth by the GFOA. And we continue to do that all the way through 2024. 29 days, 30 days. I'm saying we're good. Where this helps the school district, should the district decide to pursue a bond issue, Moody's takes a look at your 5-year forecast. They don't take a look at much of anything else, and they drill down into the details of the 5-year forecast, and this is the one things they look at. The district's credit rating is based on this. So if you can show Moody's or S&P or Finch, whatever credit agency Bedford ultimately decides to go to, that your cash position is strong, that's going to translate into a better credit rating for your bond issue, lower interest costs for your taxpayers, and an ability to do more things with more money because you're not paying money out to interest and bankers. You have more money to put into your schools and students. So the 5-year forecast, and this graph in particular, is very important for those agencies to take a look at, understand where the district is going financially. So thank you for your time. If I can answer any questions at all. My plan is to present this to the Board of Education at the November regular meeting for approval. This is due to the state of Ohio by the end of next month. If it's agreeable with the board, I'll do it at the regular meeting. And then after your consideration, I will file with the state of Ohio to get the district compliant.
Bill, I want to thank you for your ongoing dialogue that you have given us through your reports weekly. This is not the first time that we've seen some of these figures because you continue to share those figures with us. So I want to thank you for that. That helps us out quite a bit. And very in-depth report. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Mr. Stevens. I believe it's important that the Board of Education and Dr. Andrea's cabinet have the full detail of what I'm presenting, because to look at numbers is one thing, but to not understand how I'm getting to those conclusions is another. And I wanted the board to have that understanding. And if there were questions to ask and say, Bill, this doesn't make sense to me, or why are you deciding this? That way you have everything I have. So that way there are no surprises when we come to these sorts of meetings.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Okay. I think this is your show this time, right?
It is. And if you don't
Okay.
mind, Mr. Stevens, pass some of those down.
Mhm. Return back
I
to
usually
school.
wait on those because I know it's happening. I'm going to read those. Right, Mrs. Boynton, we know it's teachers, right? We always hold off until the end. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Good evening. I'm going to take this off because it will not work with the glasses. I'll be fogged up and I won't be able to see. Stay away from you, Jerry, as much as I can. All right. Well, save the best for last, right? So, no offense there, Bill. It's very interesting. I love listening to your numbers 3 or 4 times. But the more I listen to it, the more I learn it. So I do appreciate it. Thank you very much. All right. So there probably couldn't be a worse time. Well, I guess there could be a worse time, but this is a pretty bad time to be talking about our return to school plan as we are watching the numbers climb as Cuyahoga County went back into the red after being in orange for about 6 to 7 weeks or so. And since August 12th, we have reported less than 5% positive cases. So we were trending quite well. And you see recently, as fully transparent and the obvious, pointing out the obvious, that every time you turn on the TV, we're hearing about more and more cases, and just the overall disappointment in how we have been, our numbers have been climbing. But superintendents statewide have been having conversations weekly at a minimum, discussing our plans. And while many of our counterparts have returned, we're one of the few, among the few that remaining ones that have not opened. But many are still carrying on with their planning and doing so cautiously. And I am among those superintendents. So prior to the start of the school year, as a reminder, our board and we together made the decision to go virtually. Our students would attend virtually for the first quarter of school. And in 3.5 weeks, that quarter will come to a close. And so as a result, we are forced to make some decisions here. And so our plan has been November 9th. And you will hear from me this evening that my recommendation is still to move forward with that plan to return on November 9th. However, I'm going to do so with some hesitancy, and for the reasons I mentioned to you in my opening, which is the rise in numbers, et cetera, as well as the fact that we have had two cases in our district just this week. So it's been a bit of a rough week. We're getting through some things and definitely learning curves and working tirelessly to communicate and to make sure that things have been the way they should be according to plan. And so with that, as I said, with some hesitancy, I'm going to recommend the return on November 9th, but with the old adage, and since I've started all of this, which would be today's recommendation to the board, but it is subject to change, as we know, and as we have experienced throughout this experience in March, we have changed, and we know we've had to pivot numerous times as a result of data that's been presented to us. But what I'm asking for the board this evening is to allow us to continue with our planning that we have been for the return, as we know that we have to return at some point. And the planning we do now will be helpful in whenever we return. So whether that's November 9th or we're still delayed due to the rise in cases, we're going to need a plan. And as you know, we presented to you previously a hybrid plan, and we had all those details spelled out. So we do need to move ahead and finalize some of those missing pieces. And one big missing piece is how many students plan to return. So what I do have in front of you is the data that we received from the first survey that went out. Now, this survey went out a couple of weeks ago prior to, I think, the numbers rising. And it unfortunately wasn't all that helpful. What it shows you is that we have approximately, as I said, 50-50, but a slight edge towards parents wanting their students to return. What you will see different this time that we didn't see last time is a little bit of variance in the different grade bands. I know the board had asked me that question last time, and it was pretty stable. Parents across the board were saying it was 50-50-ish, 54, a little bit of an edge saying they didn't want their students home. That number has swung about 8 percentage points in the sense that we're about 52% wanting to go back. So where you'll see the difference is in our elementary. Those were our highest percentages, 59% and 55% respectively at Glendale and Central would like to have their students return. And I guess I don't think I'm all that surprised, because I think our biggest concern is, though, for all students, our preschool through third grade has been, probably the most biggest concern, if you will, for our students. And so with that said, our lowest percentage, interestingly, Columbus and Carrollwood had identical percentages, 48% in favor of returning. So they actually had a slight advantage of saying stay at home at that grade band. And then Heskett and high school right around 50%. So interesting statistics, but I wanted you to have those. And I say this with some caution because we only had approximately, it says 1,477 student responses. That doesn't mean families, but that's just under approximately half of our parents or students that responded to this. So we have half of the population in our district that we don't know what they're choosing. So this data has to be looked at with some caution because it's only half of our respondents in our district. So moving along, we plan to send tomorrow, if the board is in agreement and we want to proceed with our plan, is to send a commitment form, but it's in the form of a survey, but asking parents to commit to the second quarter of school, in person or not in person. And so with that, we want to be fully transparent with our parents that what we can provide, and I'll share that with you this evening, what it is, the expectation when we return. Because we are going to meet as many requirements as we can, and we are going to be within guidelines, but it's, we want people to be fully informed when they make the decision if they would prefer their students come in or not. So the plan is to put that out tomorrow and to be real aggressive in pursuing her parents. I'm going to, I've drafted a message for each principal to send home to their individual schools. And the reason being, when we do it at the district level, first of all, there was some data that we don't believe necessarily maybe to be true. Maybe some students decided to chime in and with some interesting emails, for example. So we're not sure if those were necessarily legitimate, but it can throw us off a little bit. But more so, if each principal is responsible for their buildings, they know their students and families. So they're able to track more closely than us trying to track 3,000 students. They're tracking 400, 300, 500, 1,000, whatever. But they're able to then know which students are coming back and which are not. At the district level, that's not all that helpful, but for a principal, they need to know that in my first grade classes, I have 10 returning in this class, 6 in this class, whatever it may be. So we are going to send out surveys, and parents will get multiple. If they have multiple children in our district, they are going to have to fill out one. They don't take all that long, but it's asking for some, obviously some personal information in terms of names, grade levels, teachers, et cetera. And then if they need transportation, because these are also the next steps that we have to plan for. So the idea would be to put that survey out, and if we don't have it by the end of this weekend, I'm going to share with parents that we will be calling you. And again, another reason why it's done at the school level, because they can put out calls and talk to parents, because if they don't have email or access to the survey, which hopefully they do, but if they don't, they can do that declaration by phone, and we can walk them through that. So once we have that information, this is critical because that will finalize our plan. You're going to hear tonight that I don't have the precise plan that we're going to do, but we are well planned for either choice. And that choice, and once I get into this PowerPoint, you'll understand more clearly. But once we know how many students want to return, again, that will guide what direction we can go in and where, because we have to remember physical space we need to take into consideration, and staffing are the two big points here that we need to have, information that we need to have. So in this presentation, it's very brief, it's just a few slides. It's a high level view of this plan. And the reason being is in our last presentation, we presented all the details to you in that extensive research that we did in planning for our hybrid plan. So those details really haven't changed. They're just going to be shored up. And in doing so, we will certainly add finishing touches as we decide on a plan. We will provide you as well as our family with all those details. We have them, but just for the purpose of this evening, just to share with you what our next steps are. I didn't feel it necessary to give you all the details, but I will share with you what I think is important for you to know. So as we move into this, we clearly know that we have a number of things to consider. Among them, one being probably the most important is to take into consideration the county COVID cases, the recommendations from the county board, as well as the governor. A lot can change. In 3 weeks from now, we might have the whole state closed down again. We just don't know. We might be seeing that we're in purple. We might be seeing that we're in yellow. We just don't know that right now. But we would like to continue to plan as if it will be safe for us to return. But if not, we're well aware that that can change. But as of right now, the tentative start date would be November 9th. The model that I was just referring to will be determined based on our student data, and I'll share with you in a couple slides here what that means. We also need to take into consideration our delivery model. And so what you will see among our options would be a learning platform. And Mrs. Patterson, that's what you've referred to several times in terms of like what people are calling a virtual academy, for example, but it's basically online and very little contact with teachers, to be fully transparent. There will be in-person instruction when we return students, and possibly our similar to what our current model is, where students are being instructed by students. It's just online. And that will be more so for our younger students. We do have to take into consideration, and one big concern is our staffing and our ability to get substitutes. And we will have some potential changes to our staffing and assignments, which I'll talk a little bit later about that. But we do have to take into consideration as well our student contact time, our master schedules. We know we're trying not to have a big departure from what we've already have established, that we want to maintain those schedules that are already intact. We do have to take into consideration, as I mentioned, class size. How many can we physically fit at a reasonable and a distance? And as you know, our Our classroom sizes vary greatly throughout the district. And our technology needs for students and teachers, that's always going to be on the forefront of our minds. And the transportation, we are looking at having 1 student per seat with 2 per seat for siblings. So that's another consideration, is our transportation and routing. And also staffing. And I have not shared this with the board, but I will share with you now because we just sort of discovered this yesterday, late afternoon, and talked about it again today. Due to the fact that we had some quarantining, we lost some drivers in the transportation department due to the quarantining. And we also have a number of them on taking advantage of either ADA or the CARES Act. And so we have a number of them at home. We've recalled all that we can. They're all here working, but we still are extremely short. And Pat is having a very difficult time accommodating our routes. So you may be hearing from me a little bit more on transportation and some of the things that we might need to do. But this is definitely a concern. If we are quarantining certain departments, we can be crippled if those numbers get big. So, but we clearly are going to be taking extra precaution and keeping people distance, especially in the transportation department, because we only have so many. The transition and non-instructional times, I have asked every principal, they have now submitted to me a plan for each unique building. It's one thing to provide for you the high-level district sort of plans and procedures, but each building has been asked to provide specific details on how they will transition students, where they will eat, the meals, the restroom, the travel, the restroom breaks. So they're all are working and have provided me with a plan. And each time I go in and provide feedback and pose questions, as does their staff. Their staff has had access to their plans, have been providing, as I'm in the Google Docs, I see teachers commenting and asking the principals questions or offering suggestions. So they've been working collaboratively with them as well. So I will go through this. I won't spend a whole lot of time, but I do want you to know that we clearly are accounting for safety measures. And when our students do return, we have purchased our high efficiency sanitizing equipment. We have the sprayers and the ionization cleaning that they do, the sprayers. And so those seem to be working very well, and they're rather efficient and clearly highly recommended. We do have signage. You've seen that before. I've provided that for you throughout the buildings with reminders. We are measuring, and this is the big one, and I want to be very honest with parents, and they will know this, that if we were to have 6 feet distancing in classrooms, we would only be able to fit a few students in most of our rooms. So in speaking with a number of my colleagues, the majority that I have spoken to are measuring for 3 feet social distancing in rooms. So, but I've done some research in the American Association, I always get their name wrong, American Academy of Pediatrics, talked about that 3 feet, and that if you can do 3 feet with masks, though, that they believe that that's a great solution, knowing that 6 feet is not practical for schools. So that would be the recommendation. Certainly, if we have less students, we can make that number bigger. That's only if we have a larger, and in some classrooms, I believe we probably will have 4 or 5 feet distancing if we have a small number of students returning. But we will use 6 feet when it is feasible and when we can make that happen. Students will have limited class-to-class transitions. We are working on, unfortunately, and I was speaking with one of, actually, I know she's gone, Mrs. Rakowski today, about transition times, and I saw in her plan, and I posed some questions about keeping students in the classrooms for specials. You know, I don't like that. I think students need movement. I think they need to get out. I think they need to change the scenery. But in this environment, the safest thing to do is to keep them contained and have teachers move. But so there will be some instances where there will be movement, but in doing so, we then have to account for cleaning as new groups come in. So we're well aware of that. We do have the hand sanitizer stations installed at the entrances and in all of the classrooms. So as soon as you enter a building, you're able to Purell and also in all the classrooms. And many still have sinks and soap and the like. Students in grades K through 12, as we know, and preschool have been encouraged, and they're doing fairly well as I visit. The little ones do have their masks on on occasion, but K through 12 will be required. So if you do return your child to school, know that it will be a requirement for staff and students K-12. And as I mentioned, we have, again, PPEs, the hand sanitizer, gloves, masks, face shields. We've provided those for all of our teachers and staff. And we will require a daily student, as we do now already with staff, but students will need to be required to do a self-check, and obviously the parents will assist with that. And we were looking at getting an app for that. There are some area districts that I've spoken to that use an app that the parent can just get on the phone and do that on the app every day. We will have an isolation space for those of students exhibiting symptoms, and we have plexiglass shields that have been installed in numerous areas, and we've ordered them for teachers and students as well. We're in the process that maybe as of today, ordering the student ones. We went back and forth about which ones we want because there are various options, and I had some disagreement among some of us trying to figure out which ones we want. But they are little carols that will be in front, and I'm sure many of you have seen them. And we already have them in place for the students who are on site, but it's a 3-sided carol. And frankly, again, we all probably know this, a student is fine and safe if they're within that space, but as soon as I turn or move, I mean, you have your mask on, that's fine. But we do believe that will assist in hopefully, again, another measure to prevent the spread. Students will have to have their own supplies, and Mrs. Boynton and I have talked about supplies recently, and that students need to make sure that they come prepared because we can't share supplies. But we will make some arrangements to have extras on site, but once we give them to students, they'll be theirs to keep. They have to bring their own water bottles. We have a number of drinking fountains, touchless ones that have been installed. Those seem to be working well. We will limit our outdoor breaks with limited recess, again, with probably more so the equipment, but we do want to get students outside, moving around, walking, running, whatever we can get them to do. And there will be tighter regulations, as there have been, about visitors coming to the building, and when they do so, they must wear masks. And extracurriculars will obviously comply with those guidelines as needed, and adjustments will be needed. As we know, I was working on updating. I spent 2/3 of, if not 3/4 of my day working on COVID related issues, and one of which were just shoring up some of our protocols, because what we did 2 months ago differed from the one I did a month ago, differed from the one I did today, in terms of making sure that all the symptoms are the same, the procedures are the same, the protocols. So we updated that, and I will have that for the staff soon. We're working on the student one now with the return of them coming. So with that, just to present a couple more slides here, the preschool, we intend to have that remain the same. That's been working well. They have been coming, again, the general education students have been coming Monday through Friday, full day, but there's only 4 to 7 on site in each one of the classrooms. And then our special needs programs are meeting, again, they typically would meet half day, 4 days a week. Now they are meeting 2 full days, and that seems to be working. And they've been doing their services. We've been having students come in for related services. So now we get to the nitty-gritty here, and that is for grades K through 6. What we believe we can do, and this is when I say, this is what I was trying to explain, it would be made clearer to you as I explain this with the data, is that we would have a couple of options here. We have learned in measuring our classrooms at the 3 feet, we can have rooms that can accommodate 12 to 20 students. It just varies. I didn't want to spell it all out, but I can tell you it's not as you would necessarily suspect that high school has more room, because that's not the case. They actually have not as much space, and the reason being is because they're bigger bodies and bigger desks, right? So we would have divided in the first instance, we would do the model that you are already familiar with, the hybrid, meaning that children attend 2 days a week. They don't attend on Mondays. They will get classroom support and help remotely, but they'll be remote 3 days and in person 2 days a week. And we would have that Monday, Tuesday, not on Wednesday, and then they'd come on Thursday, Friday. So that's the one we are well planned for. We've talked about thoroughly the last time. The second option is actually all students attending every day. And I will say that this is a new development, and we've been talking about it just in kind of like in passing. But when we sat down and actually crunched the numbers just this week, we were able to look, because we're fortunate that we have relatively small class sizes, especially in our elementaries and intermediates, that if we get the true 50% of people wanting kids to come back, that number may only be 10 students. And we are able to accommodate that. As you can see, we can accommodate 12 to 20. Now, the challenge would be is we got an anomaly where we have a class that wants to have 18 students return. Well, we might have to do some, reconfiguring in that instance. But we believe that is a possibility, especially for our elementary. Not as viable in the secondary, but I'll talk about that in a moment. But we do believe that is a possibility. But additional staff will be needed. We're accounting for that. So we will need to hire some more folks during that time, and we're aware of that. Now, the other thing, and then the other option, of course, is the full remote model, and that would remain the same, the current model of what the students are getting now. The caveat here and the challenge, until we can really determine what that will look like is there's no guarantee of the current teacher. Now we're going to try to keep students paired with their teachers, but if we use the example of students attending every day, that would pose a challenge because I'm the teacher and I'm teaching. And unless we did, I'm with the students on site. So who will have my students remotely? The one way around that would be the live streaming. And I will tell you that our teachers, we've heard from them, I don't think it's a favorable approach. And I will also tell you, I've consulted, I've done a lot of consulting and questioning of other districts. And while some people are finding some success, it is very challenging to do because you're trying to teach. And then what we're hearing is that they're tethered to their laptops and equipment, and there's some struggles there. And it's not working, from what I understand in other places, well with younger ones. It's more successful with secondary. But in order to avoid that, there might be some staffing challenges associated with that. So we also want to be transparent. Some people may not have the same teacher at home, most likely. But again, if we have teachers that are choosing to stay home, they're going to have a sub on site. So there's a lot of moving parts to this. And as I opened with the challenge about staffing. So the 7 through 12 option, similarly, in those options, both options, we would divide by the alphabets. And those students, again, would be split on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And the option B that I said is not necessarily as feasible in the upper grades, not so much middle school as it is high school. That would be a stretch to get those students all back 5 days. And I didn't want to eliminate it as an option, but I'm just being honest that I'm not sure it's a practical example because of the bigger, the more room it takes to house students. They don't have as much space in their classrooms. And then the full remote, this is the one variance as well, is that this would be, students would be on a platform at 7 through 12. So we don't believe that's the best option for K through 6. We believe they still need teacher interaction. But we currently use Edgenuity, otherwise known as Compass, our Compass program, and we've had success with that and we're familiar with it. And so as a result, the students would go on a platform, if you will, and would have limited teacher contact. And in other districts that I've spoken to, that seems to be across the board, that those that are using that virtual academy or platform is what they refer to it as. And again, no guarantee of current teacher. And then again, being fully honest, there would be limited interaction with that option. And I do believe that was my last slide. So I'm going to assume that there will be some questions, and I will also refer to my counterpart over there, Dr. Johnson, because I'll be doing all the talking. I want to share that with you. She's smiling under that. Under that
Questions,
mask.
board?
But, the governor stated today that the upswing is from people going to funerals, weddings, bars, and having parties. That's where the upswing is. I think most people are wearing the mask and doing what they're supposed to be doing. But when you do those things there, that's where the upswing. And I mean, in 2 days, it doubled.
Yeah, and Mrs. Patterson, I appreciate that point. You're right. That's what I heard in this. And to add to that, I think it was the Today Show. They were showing a stat that it's not the schools that have made the spike.
No, it's not the
And it's
schools
not
at
the
all.
students. It's not kids. Even though more children are getting it, it's not what people expected, that everybody was going to get it and kids were going to be the transmitters. That's not what they're finding.
My second question, every desk will have that plexiglass for every student? Okay.
That's our goal. We did, Mrs. Patterson, we went back and forth about secondary, because I wasn't sure if high school kids, plus you got to get them bigger because they're bigger kids. But we are looking at purchasing them all for all students. So about 1,000 of them. So it's again, going to be a big cost, but.
Anything else, Ms. Patterson?
Yeah,
That's it? Anybody? Board? No?
Yeah, I got a few questions. This data that we have here, when was this data from?
About 2 weeks ago,
So what's the most recent data?
that's the most recent. We're getting more recent. Tomorrow will be the survey that will be obviously the most recent because we that's all we have.
So you'll get another update tomorrow on these numbers?
I won't have an update tomorrow. Tomorrow, the survey is going to go out. So the goal, that's the one I was referring to that said this weekend, we need your commitment form. that is when we will know, and our goal is we have to have every student commit. Whereas this is only half of our students.
So we had planned on coming back November 9th, from what I'm hearing. Why shouldn't the survey have went out 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago?
Yes.
I mean, we don't have a lot of time to get back the data from, we got 1,477 responses from the first survey. And that was a concern of ours. And now we're sending out something that we need a definite answer from these parents. And we need it quickly in order for your plan to be put in place within about 3 weeks.
And we wanted to, our plan was to put this out earlier, but because I wasn't comfortable doing it without speaking to the board, I waited. I chose to wait.
Well,
So,
I just look at it. If we were planning November 9th, this survey should have been sent out 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, right?
The only thing I would share is yes, we because I also don't want to make it seem like we've not asked these questions. But we also needed, as you said, Dr. Selico, to get more feedback and your direction in terms of your comfort level. But I will share with my colleagues, actually, it's been actually closer to the rollout because they do want concrete answers. So I feel like even though if we had sent this out before and we see the numbers that we have now, I'm just afraid about what that would have happened, how that would have happened as well. But I think we really definitely had hoped that we really had more turnout and more numbers. But when we look at, Jerry and I talked about this, when you look at the statistics of surveys and how many people completed, actually that's pretty good. It doesn't really help us out. But if we probably had more people respond, we wouldn't need to keep going back. But all the districts that I've talked to, my colleagues that have made this transition, some of them actually was like the week before was their final commitment from parents, because the parents wanted to first hear what is the final decision on the model. They needed to hear that. And then even though they had an initial survey, after they heard the model, they did what we did right now. So they kind of did do what we did 2 weeks ago and kind of got a ballpark figure. And then they had a presentation to the board to say, okay, we're pretty sure this is what we want to do. And then that very next day, they opened that survey up again and said, okay, you have 2 days or 3 days to make a commitment because we need to shore up those master schedules. So that has kind of been what I'm hearing from my HR colleagues.
yeah, and that's a good point, because if we would have given this out 2 weeks ago, the actual commitment, and then we saw these numbers inflate, people might have very well changed their minds. And we did talk about getting it more current. We needed the most current. We are ready. The main thing is just which model we're going to go. We're going to be ready either way. It's just that we want to have the most accurate numbers we can.
No, I get that. I was just asking
Yeah.
because November 9th was the date we were going to go back.
Yep, we've known that. You're
You
right.
know.
I mean, in our minds, yes, that's what we have planned for. That's correct.
I saw the isolation space. If a student or teacher, administrator, or whatever, shows signs, what's the protocol from there? I mean, do we have that in writing that the board can see?
Well, okay, so the protocols I was discussing today and going through again, I will give you a copy of that. It's a work in progress. But yes, there's a place in each building separate from the clinic that someone, and I think that's in all buildings, I'm thinking of the ones that I know of, that a person is assigned a role, and again, it's most likely the nurse, who will go make sure they're fully protected and be with that student as we try to call, or the staff member. But the idea is, and we will reinforce over and over with parents, is we have got to have your contact information, current information, because we don't want people, sitting around, whether it's a staff member or a student.
And do we have nurses in every building now?
We do not. We have some good news. Do you want to share that? You can. The district nurse? Well,
That was
Sort
my
of
next
good
one,
news.
too.
Yes, I'm not sure, I think we might be down one, Gary?
oh, we have two that just accepted. So remember when I explained to you that
Okay, I
we
was
were
gonna
down
say,
three?
I thought we did, yeah, I
Yeah,
thought we did.
we're almost full complement now, I
Mhm.
think.
And we also will be having a recommendation for the district nurse as well. And we can talk a little bit more about that later, but we do have a recommendation for our district nurse, as well as we're filling the other positions for our building nurse.
And the only other concern I have was the 3 feet distance. I mean, since this whole thing started, it's been 6 feet, 6 feet, 6 feet. And now we're going to backtrack a little bit on that CDC guideline from 6 to 3. And that's the only other big concern I have.
I will tell you that those entities they themselves have changed that. I mean, it is 6 feet everywhere you go, yes, but in many documents, if you read, it says that they realize it's impractical, including our county board, it's impractical to try to do 6 feet in schools. So the 3 feet with masks is what they said is acceptable. I know people don't like to really hear that, but if you think about 6 feet and what that looks like in an 800 square foot room, not many bodies. And some of our buildings are 700 square feet, some of our classrooms.
Thank you.
Dr. Roth had a couple more questions
No,
concerning this about the isolation space. But I do have a question about, are the children using the lockers? And if no, if they're not using them, where would they store their materials in the classroom? Do we purchase anything, containers, so they can keep them there?
Well,
Because-
we did talk about that. That's in every one of the principal's plans, I noticed. The 7 through 12 are recommending no lockers, actually at all grade levels, because we do have some in the intermediate buildings. So they're saying no lockers, and they are going to have to carry their coats and book bags with them. We are accounting for that. I was I heard from, I think I was in Brecksville. They're allowing the students to go to their lockers every other period. So to stagger, so in other words, I can go to my locker after first period and the next group can go after second period, so it's not everybody at their lockers at the same time. So I've asked the principals to at least consider that, but the accommodation we would be making against the code book would be that they would be allowed to carry those things with them. We are a little concerned at winter time because of coats, but they would put them on the backs of their chairs. That's what we've discussed.
That's it, Ms. Williams?
You rest your case?
Thank you.
That's what you look,
Rest my
I rest.
Dr. Selico, just, I know that you have ongoing dialogue with your colleagues and hearing what they're doing and they're saying and whole plans and so forth. If your colleagues decided to say, we're going to stay out, and you truly feel that you want to stay in, would you continue to stay in? Would you be?
I couldn't hear the last part. If my
Would you-
colleagues say they're going to stay out, would I still
Based
recommend that we
on
come in?
where you are and your decision, would you want to be in? You would still want to bring your kids in, even if your colleagues wanted to stay in?
I would base it mostly on the data that comes from the county and the governor's office. I would imagine if they're making that decision, I would probably be similar because I know they're using that same guidance.
Well, the majority of your
Yeah.
colleagues. want
Yeah.
to stay.
Yeah. I mean, I know that's, and I'm being fully transparent. Not only am I concerned about, us being the only ones out and everyone else around us, okay, that's really not an important reason a good reason to send kids in or out. My own personal belief is these children have been out since March. They've been out of school for 7 months. 7 months. I'm watching the impact at home. I'm watching it in these classrooms. It's a long time to be away from people and learning. And I feel very strongly about that. I'm very concerned. I'm very sad that our children are not back. And I know a lot of our teachers share that sentiment. They've said how much they miss children. I had a teacher say it to me today, like how much they just can't wait to see them. But the learning and the harm that it's doing academically and socially for our students and emotionally is on my mind. It weighs heavily on me.
and then that goes to my next one. Academically, yeah, I see where we are when it comes down to being able to adjust, even when, if our kids came back. Now, right now, we had 9 weeks of virtual. That was an adjustment. Coming in again, there's going to be another adjustment regarding when they come back. The next, which would be the next 9 weeks, would be the semester. Darn near half of the school year will be dealing with readjusting. I'm concerned based on half of the school year is already will be up. They've gone through an adjustment stage from virtual to coming in and face to face, trying to get adapted, trying to go through that process. Those are some of my concerns, just overall with the adjustments and being able to adapt and getting into that. Now, from what I'm hearing from you and probably others, I don't hear too many issues, maybe some adjustments with teachers getting with the lower level kids and being able to get acclimated and focus and those type of things. I get that at the elementary school level and the lower levels. I do understand that. It can be challenging. But my thing is just, those are just some of my concerns. The actual percentage, I think when I spoke with you, I think it was like 45 to 55.
At one time it was, and we got
Okay.
more respondents.
And that right there, it's not that far off based on the numbers. If it was a real balance off, then I would say, oh boy.
Right, right.
Okay, but it's not that far off. Those are just concerns, questions, based on where we are, and the that's it.
Yeah, and Mr. Stevens, if I may, just to really quickly comment on that. You're right, there's always adjustments and change, and there will be some acclimation that takes place. The good news is that students are accustomed to being in school. The bigger adjustment that I was worried about was them working from home. So now we have the best of both worlds. So when we do return, and let's say we know that there's a likelihood that we might have to pull the trigger to go back virtual, that should all be seamless now, all of it. So I feel confident that we'll be able to do that. So it's the other way that concerned me more, but I definitely agree that there's adjustment and acclimation that has to take place. And Mrs. Boynton knows she's getting her students back this week and getting them acclimated, right?
My question also is, what's the difference? And I know to bring them back, getting them together and getting students squared away as soon as possible. But it seems like, I know we said 9 weeks. I know we said the first 9 weeks. But then it just seemed like we're rushing to push things through. Like I said, the 9th is when we're supposed to be doing this. But then, what's the difference between now and January to observe and look at where we are? Because as indicated, we may or may not, I know it's just speculation based on where things may escalate, and then we have to shut it back down or whatever it might be. And we just can't predict the future. I get it. But I don't know. That's just, I do have some concerns and some you have some schools who have brought kids back and then now they're closing up based on the students coming back. I don't know where they picked it up from, may not be at the school, but they have it. There are schools who have closed down based on schools being open. So it's not like it's not coming from the students. We are not saying it's not coming from the students. We can't say it is or not. But there are some schools that have closed down based on opening up. So I just, I do have some concerns. And yeah, that's where we are. So what do you need to hear from us as a board? If you don't have any other board,
I do. I
any
have
other
a
questions,
comment.
go right ahead.
I would first like to say that it is a pandemic, and pandemic will cause for changes and adjustments to be made. That's what we expect, because it's not normal that we have a pandemic every day. But secondly, I want to say that I think we have to look closely what Bedford City School District has in place as far as following the CDC guidelines and the safety. When you look at the schools that have closed, some of those things that we have in place were not in place to protect our children as well as our staff and our teachers. There's a school district right now, currently, they don't even have shields. So they're not following CDC guidelines. So I think we have to consider that. I do think we need to consider the cases that we have maybe in our city, not just in our city, and our cities that are the children that we serve. And I do want to say, because I can share that our children did come back this week, for 1 week, my class especially. They need to be back in school. If the safety, if we're following CDC guidelines, it's workable. I have to say, it was a wonderful week for me. It was a wonderful week with the number of students that was in the class, and there are a lot of children that are virtual. The one concern is, and you did bring it up, the changing of the teacher, because based on the number of children that wanted to remain virtual. And I have to say, Rob, that changed up until the day that school started. You can get a commitment from a parent, but it changes overnight. I received phone calls overnight based on surveys where they're going to be, and the night before, I don't want to do this. So we made the adjustments. We made the changes. This is a pandemic. We will be providing education, whether it's virtual or face-to-face. We made those changes, but there are going to be some things that people are very uncomfortable with these changes because it's a pandemic, and it is because it's not the way we normally do things. In making those changes, we were still able to have the teaching staff, but it's not a win-win situation and it's not a lose-lose situation, but this is what we do in a pandemic. We do the best that we can. And I do see that it was so necessary, especially, I'm speaking for elementary, especially for the elementary children to come back. I applaud Carol Wood's data showing that there was not a big slide in the gap standards. Maybe were there and what, or were not there, but they had some good numbers. But there's so many where the numbers are not good. There's so many where the children need the face-to-face, and they need it for their social, emotional learning. Oh my goodness. That's where the big gap is right now. One of the biggest gaps, the social, emotional learning. The children need the contact, the interaction. You have to be there to see it. And I know if some of you have visited our schools, the kids that are back in school, you can see just the difference and the changes that the children are experiencing, and also the teachers. You know, I know the numbers may be great where teachers don't want to come back, but when you see all the things that are in place, you know, entering in separate doors, the setup where we can do tracking if something based on where the children are coming in, it really is workable. And I do challenge the board to please look at the districts that's closed and see what they had in place. Did it look like Bedford before we make any kind of decision? Did it look like Bedford? Did the busing look like Bedford? Did the classroom look like Bedford with the way we had it set up before a decision is made? It's working fine where I am. I like it. I'm glad they're back.
I can't hear you, Ms. Boyd. What you
I'm
say?
glad they're back. I am glad that the students are back.
Oh,
And just to piggyback on what Mrs. Boynton was saying, when those districts close their schools, they close that one particular school. They don't close the whole district down. So that's another thing.
And I just would add, and thank you both. I do want to say too, and I should have said this earlier, this is no reflection on how our teachers have been doing virtually, because they've been doing an outstanding job. And I've been a part of many lessons. I've been a part of walking through the schools and hearing that. I've shared with you on many occasions how proud I am of the work that they've done. And I mean, that's very important for me to say again, because these children are getting, I think, the best experience that they possibly can. So when I say that children are suffering at home, it's not due to the lack of our efforts on our part. It's because they're not around other children. They're not in front of teachers. There's value to seeing interacting. So this is nothing. They've done an outstanding job. I couldn't be prouder of our staff.
Mr. Stevens, I got one more thing.
Right
No,
ahead.
I agree with Mrs. Boynton. I agree with these kids need to be back. I don't doubt that one bit.
Yep.
But I'm going to piggyback off what Mr. Stevens says is, November 9th was the day, and it seems like we're rushing to get things done. And I mean, we'll bring them back November 9th. They'll go out. I don't know how many days they get for Thanksgiving. And then a couple weeks after, 3 weeks after, we're going out for the Christmas break. And don't you think that, at least in my opinion, that time right there could really solidify a good plan, get plexiglass in place, get everything in place?
We will be ready. We will be ready. And I know that, I've had this conversation. Those that doubt, I'm one of those who are going to work all that much harder to make sure that this is the best experience and everything is ready. And I've said that numerous times. I've said that to our leadership. We're going to be ready. We have done an outstanding job to this point, and I have no reason to believe that we won't do a great job with this transition. The only piece that is last minute, if you will, in my opinion, is getting the information from the parents. And that's because, as Ms. Boynton shared, they have, I'm sure parents at home have changed their mind 3 or 4 times. And when we get that, then we'll pull the trigger on which model we're going to use, but we're set. We've made arrangements for some of these, the platform, for example, we're ready to go. It's just a matter of which one we're going to do. And I understand, because those of you who know me, you all know me well enough to know that I don't like anything last minute. And anyone who reports to me knows that we don't do anything last minute. Right. So we make sure that we're well prepared. And so this does it cause a little anxiety? Yes. I haven't slept in weeks because every night I wake up with a new thought, but we'll be ready. And will it be perfect? No. And I'm going to go on the record saying right now, it will not go without a glitch, but our virtual did not. It took us a week to 2 weeks to get that ironed out. So I anticipate the same, and there will be bumps. I'm not going to tell you this will be perfect. It will not, because I'd be lying. But we're going to do the darn best that we can, and we'll be ready.
Mr. Stevens, I have one more question, if you don't mind.
Right ahead.
So, Dr. Selico, I remember that we were thinking about after the 9th week, which would be November 9th, we were thinking of, we had in place either 100% virtual or hybrid. Would it be more comfortable for everyone if we stuck to, we only had 2 plans, 100% virtual or coming back 100%, or a hybrid? So is there a reason why we're just not sticking to the hybrid model of 2 days?
Well, I mean, the reason being is that,
Because that's already in place.
Yeah. sure,
Right, yes.
we are ready for that. The reason, I think mostly, I mean, I was very excited to see that we can get children in school 5 days, if we can make it happen. And because the numbers, our class sizes are so small, and once we looked at that again, realizing that we can get students in for 5 days, I mean, the hybrid is tricky. I'm listening to my friends who are parents of kids who are in hybrid. I'm listening to teachers. And you're doing it yourself, right now. And depending on how your model's set up, my friend is very frustrated as a parent, because the way they did it, though, they did it a little bit different than us in their district. But I'm concerned that I think the 5-day-a-week is consistency, continuity, rather than a student coming in and then I don't get to see you for 2 days and I'm going home, I'm going to teach, I'm going to learn there. It would just provide continuity and get more students in for a longer period of time. It's just, is my opinion.
And the reason I ask that is because I know some of the other districts, they did the hybrid model, the 2 days, 3 days off. Not, I want to use the word off, 3 days
Right.
remote,
Yeah.
want to say off.
Yeah.
And that for 2, 3 weeks
Okay.
before
Okay.
they started bringing children in for the 5 days.
Okay.
Just
Something to consider.
something that I
Yeah, we'll talk about it.
noticed. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
So essentially, Mr. Stevens, I think you asked what I need from the board. I'm recommending to you that we proceed with our plan, that we have it ready. And again, if on November 3rd or 5th or 7th or October 30th, the governor shuts us down, then we're not doing it. But when we do decide that day we open, we are going to be ready, just as we would be on November 9th.
You're asking the board to move forward with the hybrid model, regardless if it's November 9th or whatever date we decide to come back.
That's right. Again, I'm hopeful that it's November 9th.
Now,
Yes.
my question is, we've already had a plan in place, a hybrid model, before we decided to go virtual, correct?
Yes.
So what is the difference? It's a little bit more advanced or a little bit more detailed
It's
than
actually,
what we had before?
it's not very much different than what you presented, which is why I didn't go through all the details today, because you've seen it. The difference would be as if we did the 5-day, but the hybrid itself is ready to go. It's been ready.
Well, my thing is, the hybrid, if you have the hybrid model in place, we need to have one in place regardless. Regardless, because we're looking at not coming back full go, are we? Or, I mean, if that's one of the plans, correct? If that's-
Not with all students, but those who want to return. That is an option.
Okay, so we have to have a model or the model in place anyway. So I would, think that we need to have one in place, or regardless if it's the 9th or any other day. The key is you're asking, are we ready to do it November 9th?
So here's what I would say to that. I mean, yes, again, I stick with the fact that I would love to return on November 9th. Being very realistic that may not happen, but my plan is between now and November 9th to be in great communication with all of you to say, hey, here's what's happening now. Here's another update. And as we lead up to that date, we'll be making probably a last minute call, because I don't see how we couldn't, because I just can't tell you what's going to happen on November 9th. Again, we could be shut down totally.
So if the governor doesn't shut it down by November 9th, you're looking for opening up on November 9th.
If numbers are favorable and we're not in, maybe if we spend the next 3-4 weeks in red, I think we probably have to have a conversation about that as a county, or the area, the Bedford area is affected. So I can't just say it's based on a governor's recommendation. We got to look at all of that data, in my opinion.
I understand. So you're asking for us to give you marching orders to have something in place so that we can start on November 9th.
Right, put out the survey tomorrow, get the input from parents, collect some more data, and finalize our plan.
I will go first. Or my answer would be not to start on November 9th. That's where I am right now, based on what I see here and how I feel personally. So to go with the plan, yes. Start November 9th? No. That's where I'm at.
I would like for you to go with the plan and to start on November 9th. We stated at the beginning that we were going to open up on November the 9th, barring anything that's happening. If something happens, I understand that you cannot start, but I'm ready for the kids to be back in school, and they are ready to be back in school.
Okay, Rob?
I'm with Mr. Stevens. I don't have to say anything better. I'm with Mr. Stevens.
Okay, Ms. Boynton?
I'm ready to move forward, bring the children back on the ninth.
Well, that's what you have, Dr.
All
Selico.
right, thank you. Well, again, I think we assess as we move
Excuse
forward.
me?
She said, what do we do? So I'm saying we'll move forward and we'll continue to assess as it gets closer, I would imagine. And
I
I'll
can't
keep-
hear what you're saying.
I said, I would imagine we'll just continue, we'll do our planning, but we'll be in touch about what the date will actually be. Right? Based on the fact that it was 2 to 2 is what the question was.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you. Okay. All right, Dr. Selico. So right now, do you have another superintendent's report to give? Other than that? Okay. So, board, at this time, we're going to go into executive session. And we're going to go into I'd like to make a motion to consider, to go into a executive session to consider an appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee. Second, I made a motion, Ms. Patterson seconded it. Call the roll.
Stevens.
Aye.
Okay, we're going into executive session at 6:42. Okay.